Today on the Surviving the Human Experience podcast, we have a very powerful episode. We're blessed to have Victor Fernandes, owner and coach of Fernandes Fit, with us today to share wisdom and insights on overcoming fear and living life to the fullest. In this episode, Victor will walk us through his journey, which ultimately led him to releasing his recently published book that is rooted in expressing why your life matters and why the story of your life matters. So before I bring Victor on, I'd like to share a little more about him. Victor served as a sports journalist for 26 years, covering numerous professional sporting events, ranging from youth to professional levels to include the National Hockey League's Stanley Cup final. He chose to conclude his career and choose the path of passion over paychecks, at which time he entered the health and wellness industry. After becoming a personal trainer and spending some time working as a personal trainer for a gym in Ocean City, Maryland, he decided it was time to take a chance at himself, in which time Fernandes Fit was born. Few additional highlights I'd like to share about Victor. He resides in North Carolina with his wife. He has 3 sons and 2 fur babies. He is a National Academy of Sports Medicine certified personal trainer, online health and fitness coach, fitness nutrition specialist, and performance enhancement specialist. He is the best-selling author of Reclaiming My Authentic Self, A Journey from Fear to Freedom, which was published in February 2025. Best-selling co-author of Real Talk with Real Fit Pros, which was published in May of 2023, and the host of Healthy Lives, Healthy Business podcast. So welcome to the show, Victor.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, we have a lot to cover in our discussion today. I know we're going to only have an opportunity to scratch the surface, so we might need to bring you back to do a part 2 if we don't get through everything. But your story and your messages that you are going to be sharing with our listeners today really provide a lot of inspiration and provide practical tools and techniques on how to move the needle from surviving to thriving. I read your book, Reclaiming My Authentic Self, and I thought it was phenomenal. The vulnerability, authenticity that you're sharing, and the real honest accounts are a true testament of life's journey. So I want to jump right in. I gave a little bit about your background, but I always like to ask my guests, can you share a little bit more about your story so our listeners can get more acquainted with you?
Well, I know for me, it all starts, as corny and cliche as it may sound. It all starts with the birth of my now almost 15-year-old son, my youngest son, because at that time I was the most unhealthiest I was in my entire life. I was 250 pounds. I was in my 30s, but I felt much older. But the biggest challenge I always faced back in those days, and I equate it back to how I felt, not just my weight, not just, my body fat percentage, all those other things that we tend to focus on. It's just how I felt about me, how I felt about where my life was, who I was as a husband, as a father, as just a human being. And I didn't like what I saw when I looked in the mirror. So for me, that's when I realized something. We live in a society where you hear phrases like, rise and grind. I'll sleep when I'm dead. And as great
Mm-hmm.
as those sound, as motivating as those may be to some people, and I'm all for working extremely hard for our goals and going above and beyond for our clients or customers, whatever it may be, we also have to take care of ourselves. Our health and well-being is the only thing in our life that impacts everything else. If we're not at our best, how in the world could we possibly be at our best for those who count on us the most, the ones we care about the most, and for everything that we find important to us? So the day my youngest son was born, he'll turn 15 here in July. The nurse hands me him, and we all talk about, oh, we look into their eyes and we see love and we see. I didn't see that. As sad as that sounds, I didn't see that. I saw me going in the direction that I was headed with my own personal well-being, and realizing that if I don't do something about it, I'm not going to be around long enough to see him grow up. As
Mm-hmm.
morbid as that sounds, that's the first thought that crossed my mind. And that should never be the case.
Mm-hmm.
Birth of a child should be the most joyous experience in life.
Right.
And it felt so morbid to me that I may not be around long enough to see him take his first step, graduate from high school, go to college, get his degree, get married, have kids, have a great career. I might not be around long enough to see most of any of those things. And I realized if I didn't start doing something about that, you know, I was going to reach a point where there is the point of no return, where I just wouldn't do anything about it to my detriment and to my family's detriment.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I started working with a coach, and we always talk about, we all have the same goals initially when we're talking about health and well-being. It's, I want to lose weight. I want to maybe build some muscle. I want to, I want my clothes to fit better. I want to
Right.
have more energy. I have, grandchildren. I want to be able to get on the floor and play with them and be able to get back up, simple things
Mm-hmm.
like that, which are great. They're all great goals. But what I discovered was that the real goals we're shooting for, we
Mm-hmm.
haven't even thought of yet. For me, when I started working out, started losing weight, started feeling better, clothes fit better, all that, one day I realized, well, if I'm able to do this, what else can I do?
Right.
What else is out there? All those
Mm-hmm.
things that I shortchanged myself on or I talked myself out of because I didn't like myself. I wasn't confident enough in myself. What can I do? In the beginning, I didn't think about, oh, I'm going to leave an industry I was in for 26 years in the newspaper industry. And then I'm going to go into health and fitness. Then I'm going to become a trainer. And then I'm going to start my own business and build my own. Those weren't thoughts in my mind. But as you start losing the weight and starting feeling better and starting gaining more confidence, you start thinking bigger. I
Mm-hmm.
always I always tell my clients, especially early on in the process, if what you're thinking about, the goals that you have in mind aren't puckering a certain set of cheeks,
Mm-hmm.
you're not thinking big enough.
Right.
It should scare you. And when I
Mm-hmm.
started thinking about leaving the sports journalism industry and heading into the health and fitness industry, and then we were talking about building my own business. We talked about moving away from a town we had lived in for 15 years and built a life together. It's all those things that you start thinking about. It's like, well, you know what? I always thought those were impossible. Now I don't think that's the case anymore. And it all stems back to being able to, you know, look in my son's eyes and say, I need to do something about this now so I
Mm-hmm.
can experience all those great, formative milestone moments in his life. And then it just kind of took off from there.
Oh, I love that. And again, it's the honesty, it's the sharing that a moment that's typically thought of as this joyous occasion and you're supposed to be elated was really a wake up call for you. It was a moment where you literally had to look at that man in the mirror and do that self reflection and say, okay, this beautiful baby is inspiring me to want more and to do more. And so that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So as a fellow author, I can appreciate the amount of time, energy, and effort, frustrations as well that go into writing a
All of
book.
it.
It's exciting, but it can be very challenging and overwhelming at the same time. So what inspired you to write the book?
Well, to be honest, I had wanted to write a book, not necessarily the book I wrote, but just a
Mhm.
book for probably 30 years now. I was in sports journalism. That's sort of the avenue that a lot of my fellow sports journalist colleagues and
Mhm.
friends went down the path of, and writing a book on their experiences and so forth. But once again, I thought about writing a book for, probably every 6 months to a year for many, many years, and always talked to myself, I don't have anything important to write about. No one's going to want to read anything I have
Mm.
to write. So why am I going to? I couldn't possibly do that. So why even bother?
Mhm.
Then that's the same path, the hamster on the wheel path that I
Yeah.
took year after year after year. And really, even in the last, say, 5 or 10 years, or certainly last 5 years when I got into the health and fitness industry, I knew I had, deep down, I knew I had a story to share. And I knew that people would resonate because if I was going through it, somebody else out there was going through something similar at the very
Yes.
least. But again, it was building that confidence, to be able to, really, put, the proverbial pen to paper, if you will,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
be able to write that book. And to be honest, a lot of gratitude and credit goes to my publishers who are good friends of mine. They're also business coaches of mine, Jonathan and Renee Loudermilk of Smart Shark and Smart Publishing. That's their arm of their publishing arm of their business.
Mhm.
And they really helped me through it. And for me, it was a very delicate time for me, a very personally charged time for me because I started writing it a few months before my dad passed away back, about a year and a half ago. So I set the book down for a while after that, and then I went back to it a few months after he passed. So an already personal topic became even more personal because for me, the hardest part as an adult, the hardest lesson I had to learn was to not merely exist in life, to
Mhm.
actually live life. And I tell people all the time, I didn't start living life till I was 47 years old. I'm 53. So I'm still in my relative infancy as far as I'm concerned. I'm 6 years
Yes.
old in that respect.
Yeah.
We're going reverse dog years, if you will,
Uh-huh.
being a dog person.
Yeah.
So really my life has just begun because I
Mhm.
didn't live that life prior.
Right.
And the hardest part about writing this book was the two people that are most heavily involved in that book besides myself are my parents. And I couldn't ask for two better parents. They sacrificed of themselves every day of their adult life to raise myself and my sister, provide a great life, for us. They came from a very, very poor background in my family's native Portugal. My mom went to work in a factory at 9 years old to help support her family. It gives you an idea of how poor they were and what type of lifestyle she grew up in. So she always wanted more for her children. Sadly, though, to the detriment of herself. My dad, same thing. And along the way, really unconsciously, taught me lessons that were rooted in fear. You
Mhm.
know, don't take risks. Something
Yeah.
bad's going to happen. You
Mhm.
know, the goal as an adult was to, go to school, get your degree,
Mhm.
get a good job, get a good paying job, you know, get married, buy a house, raise a family. And then I thought to myself at one point, this was years ago, I said, all right, well, then what comes after that? And is that all we're supposed to do while we're doing those things? Because none of those things I named are bad. Those are
Mhm.
all good
Mhm.
things. But
Right.
at no point does it take into account, all right, well, what do I want to do for me?
Mhm.
And really after I do all that, I get married, I graduate college, I did that. I got a good, good job, good paying job, did that, got married, had the kids, bought the house, did all that, raised a family, still raising our youngest.
Yeah.
After we do all that, then what?
Mhm.
Do we just sit there and
Exist.
wait to die?
Right. Right.
And that's the thing. My dad especially. Here's a man I'm proud to be named after.
Mhm.
And up until he suffered his second and most serious stroke about 8 years ago, and then he slowly but surely went downhill from there. But prior to that, here was a man who looked 20 years younger than he was,
Yeah.
had a heck of a lot more hair than I did back then, much less now. Still envious of his hair. He had much more than I did for much longer than I did. And he was physically active, he was mentally sharp. And then, so he was one that he looked younger, he felt younger than he was.
Right.
Then he
Right.
suffered that stroke and his mentality changed. And at
Mhm.
that point it was, well, why bother?
Mhm.
And then it went downhill from there. My mom, in the meantime, was his sole caretaker, his primary caretaker. So she was a prisoner in her own home. And
Mhm.
she's old school Western European, where I'm the mother, I'm the rock of the family. I do for everybody else, but I don't do for myself.
Yeah.
And she still is. A year and a half later, since my dad
Mhm.
passed, she still is. Still a
Mhm.
prisoner in her own mind, prisoner in her own home. She doesn't know how to enjoy life. So it serves as a constant reminder to me, and that's a big part of that book, is we only get to do this once. We
Yeah, we
can't
do.
clone ourselves and come back and do it all over again. And no,
Mhm.
you get to do it once. So you may as
Mhm.
well do it right the first time. We make mistakes in
Yeah.
doing all that, but we need to do it right the first time. But that was the hardest part about writing this book was
Mhm.
I want to share the cautionary tale, if you will, that it came from good intentions, but it was rooted in fear. And I wanted to show people that we need to live life, not be afraid of it, But at the
Hmm.
same time, I didn't want to write it like I was throwing my parents under the bus because that's the
Yeah.
last thing I wanted to do. So that was extremely hard to find that
That
sweet
fine
spot,
line.
if you will. That, yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, it's sometimes a challenge to show that authentic truth and not hurt others in the process, and being able to convey that message independent of the person or people, because you're giving an underlying limiting belief, a storyline. There's a message there. We just, yeah, being careful and cautious. Totally understand. Totally understand. So you really touched on what I was going to ask next was your conversation in the book about working to live and living to work, and how that was something that presented itself as you saw to be maybe a cultural norm,
Mhm.
having watched your parents. And so let's pack that a little bit. How do you feel that concept is impacting our human experience? I mean, do you see, even working with your clients, a lot of people that are really just in that autopilot mode, thinking that this is all there is?
100%. And I've been fortunate to have seen it from both sides of the coin. I'm a
Okay.
first generation Portuguese American, and I
Hmm.
spent almost every summer growing up from 18 months till I was 21 in that country, seeing how they do things, how they live over there. And it's such an interesting dynamic because it's polar opposite of what we're taught here.
Hmm.
Here, you like I said earlier, you rise and grind, you work. I'll sleep when I'm
Yeah.
dead. It's no, it's the norm to have a 40-hour a work week, 40-hour a week job, and work 50, 60, 70, 80 hours, and be
Right.
proud of that fact.
Hmm.
I mean, think about when somebody tells you, "Yeah, I'm working 80 hours a week," and there's that, they're beating their chest, like
Yes.
it's such a proud moment for them,
Right.
and we don't, because we haven't been taught any other way. Now I go over there, and actually we're going here in June. We're going there for a few weeks, taking my family for the first time, and over there. They take summers off. I always tell them they have everybody has a teacher's schedule, even though they're not necessarily a teacher.
I love it.
And they work to live. They do their job, they work hard at it, they earn a living, but the rest of the time is spent enjoying life, enjoying
Mhm.
family, you know, basically taking care of themselves in those ways. And they don't work themselves into the ground. They don't focus on just work, and that's how they identify themselves. They
Mhm.
identify themselves as human beings who are simply just trying to enjoy life and do
Mhm.
right by themselves and their family.
Mhm.
It's a really interesting dynamic that I'm looking forward to, especially my son, to expose him to it, because it's so far different than what we're taught here and what we see here. You look at it on social media, all the influencers, all the catchphrases we hear, and it's like at what point do we realize that, first and foremost has to be us. It has to be
Mhm.
our health and well-being, because really, I saw something the other day and I posted it on social media where it said, we all have 1,000 problems until we have a health problem, then we have one problem.
Yes.
The rest of it doesn't matter. I can tell people firsthand experience. My wife was diagnosed with cancer less than a year after our youngest was born,
Mhm.
and when we heard the doctor tell her she has cancer, everything stopped. All those things I considered important, my job, my career, and everything
Mhm.
else, got pushed to the side. So why is it that we push our until it takes something like that to happen for us to realize what's truly important and all the things we've ignored up to that point?
Hmm. So true. And we see that. You see that when people show up on your doorstep. I see that when people show up on my doorstep doing the energy work and the trauma healing that happens because people push themselves to the point of no return. And I've said
Mhm.
often, when I sit with clients, there is no one that is going to stand up at your funeral and say, "Boy, she sure did a great job at work," or "they processed X amount of whatever's." It's just not going to happen. And there is this level of pride that comes with thinking you're doing a great job, when in actuality we're trying to go to work to make a little bit of money to enjoy ourselves, not to make that become our sole purpose and our identity. And I think a lot of people have married their identity with what they do instead of who they are. And that's a whole nother level of unpacking that ends up happening along the journey. Yeah. So let's jump into the topic about accountability. I love that you addressed accountability. Such a huge thing. It's a buzzword. Everybody talks about it. Everybody throws it around like, yeah, I'm accountable. But are you really accountable? Right. And so in your book, you wrote, it took me many years to come to grips with that observation because it's hard for me, even to this day, to admit that I had the power within me to evoke change for the better within myself and in turn for everyone and everything around me. I could have done something different. I could have done anything different. I could have changed at any point in time the personal path I was on, and yet I did nothing. So let's talk about accountability.
Mhm.
What did that look like for you once you decided it was time to look at the man in the mirror and make a change for the better?
Well, there was a line that I shared in the book, and I wrote specifically, said, no matter what goes on in life, and I'm paraphrasing this part, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but no matter what goes on in my life, it's all my fault.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, we always talk, you always hear people say, well, I didn't have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Something happened, well, I didn't have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Of course we do. We always have a choice. We either have the choice to do something or not do something.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, I did I have a choice to not eat healthy for my family? Of course I did. So I grew up in a Western European family. I always joke that we were on the Mediterranean diet long before it was such a fancy, fashionable name to apply
Right.
to a diet that has existed forever.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I had cornered the market myself. I'd be a billionaire right now. But that's how we ate. So why was I
Mm-hmm.
250 pounds? My mom has never been heavy. My
Mm-hmm.
dad, no matter what shape he was in, was never heavy. My
Mm-hmm.
sister's never really been heavy. So why was I? Well, obviously it wasn't hereditary. Obviously it wasn't based on lessons learned from the nutrition that we had growing up. It was my fault. I chose to, in my career, since I was traveling a good bit, to live my life in arena food or
Mm-hmm.
drive-through food and all. That was my choice. But I convinced myself that I had to do it because that's all I had time for. We always we will anything that's truly important to us, we will find a way. We will find a way to do it. And if it's not important to us, we will talk ourselves out of it. And I
Mm-hmm.
tell I simplify it to people like this with this analogy. If I were to put an apple and a bag of chips in front of you, along with a soda and a bottle of water, I'll bet there's not one person on this planet who wouldn't know which food they should pick to eat and which liquid they should drink. Not one. So why is over 40% of our population in this country deemed obese? It's
Mm-hmm.
not because we don't have the basic knowledge.
Right.
It's all here and all here. It's in our minds and it's in our hearts. If
Mm-hmm.
it's truly important to us, we're going to do something about it. And if it's not, we won't. And until we get to that point where come hell or high water, I'm going to take care of myself.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the yo-yo diet comes from. It's not because we do this diet or we do that diet. That's just the effect. That's what we choose to do. It's us getting to a point and saying, I want to do this, but not really believing it. So we kind of half-heartedly do it, or it
Right.
sounds really good in our heads, but it really doesn't. It really doesn't ring true with us when it's time,
Mm-hmm.
to actually do the work. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, the accountability aspect of it is accepting all my flaws and faults for what they were. It was all my fault. But the cool thing is that no matter how much of it is all my fault, all of it, I have within me the ability, the choice to say, I'm either going to do something about it or I'm not. And obviously the end result is going to stem from that. If I do something about it, I'm going to get the results I want. And if I don't do something about it, I'm not going to get the results I want. It really is as simple as that. But you gotta accept the fact that you're going to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna fall flat on your face. Losing 75 pounds like I did in 14 months, it wasn't smooth sailing the entire time. There were plenty of bumps in the road along the way, and you have to expect that. But as long as you accept the fact that no matter what happens, it's all based on the choices you're making,
Mm-hmm.
the rest of it tends to fall into place no matter what direction we go.
Right. Love that. So I'm hearing intention and belief. You got to
Hmm.
believe in yourself and the process, and you have to have the intention channeled towards it. Because if it's
Yep,
not, you will derail yourself.
100%.
Self-sabotage. It's one of those limiting
Hmm.
beliefs that gets us every time. Oh, all right.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about change.
Mhm.
Why do you feel it's so challenging for people to become comfortable with the uncomfortable and embrace change?
Because it's the lesser of two evils.
Mm,
We tend to lean more. We always hear the phrase lean towards pleasure and away from pain.
mm-hmm,
Well, I think we also tend to lean to what we find most comfortable. Take, for example, I'm sure you've heard, you're in the health and fitness sphere, so I'm sure you've heard this a million times. I'm going to go do insert diet here because I lost weight, before using that diet. And I'm not, we can talk about keto, we can talk about vegetarian, I mean, paleo, carnivore, all of it.
one of
It
them.
all ends up the same way. I
Mm-hmm.
had so many people tell me, well, I'm going to go back and do keto because I lost 30 pounds. Well, and it makes you stop and think, all right, so let's unpack that for a second. You lost 30 pounds. Where did those 30 pounds go? Well, I gained 30 pounds back. So did it really work?
Mm-hmm.
And was it really the diet's fault?
Mm-hmm.
Or was it operator error?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I play golf, some days better than others. I don't
Mm-hmm.
blame my clubs as much as I would love to and throw them in the pond because I hit a bad shot. Oh, I hit a bad
Mm-hmm.
shot because I hit a bad shot myself.
Right.
Same thing here. So we hear that a lot. So it's understanding that, we have to find a way that's going to work best for us and understand that it's not always going to work day by day, but we got to keep going forward with that process.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where that comes from. It's the mindset of, oh, I'm going to do this because I'm familiar with it. Think about people that walk into a gym that haven't been in a gym for a long time. Where do they
Mm-hmm.
gravitate to? The treadmill,
The
the
cardio. Mm-hmm.
elliptical,
It's
because,
easy.
well, it's not just that it's easy, it's familiar. They
Right.
know what to do. They step
Right.
on it, they punch a couple of buttons, they
Yes.
start
Yes.
walking,
And it
start
works.
moving their arms and legs.
Uh-huh.
And that's fine. It's better than doing nothing at all.
Yeah.
But I know having worked in a brick and mortar gym for years, most of my clientele were people that would walk in with well intentioned. They came
Mm-hmm.
because the hardest part is getting in that door and looking around, and they're looking at equipment like they're looking at unicorns. They have
Mm-hmm.
no idea what this piece of equipment does. So again, that's uncomfortable. And then you factor in the hardest thing people, try to do. The one thing that they really have a hard time accepting is asking for help,
Yes.
because that insinuates weakness,
Mm-hmm.
or at least in our minds, that's what we think. It
Mm-hmm.
insinuates like we're not strong enough to do it on our own. I can
Right.
tell you right now, asking for help is one of the most brave things you can do,
Mm-hmm.
because you realize that, you know what, I've tried it on my own. It just isn't working. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to put myself in somebody's hands and listen to what they have to say. Take it to heart, whether I like it or not, whether I agree with it or not. And I'm just going to follow that process. I'm going to embrace the process and see what happens. I'll tell people
Mm-hmm.
right off the bat, my very first coach 15 years ago, my first workout was 10 minutes on a treadmill at 2 miles an hour.
I love it. You got to
That was
start
it.
somewhere. You have to start
That's all I
somewhere.
could
Yes.
do. That's
Yes.
all I could do. And that's okay.
Yeah.
But we have to embrace the fact that we are where we're at because of the choices we made and the habits we
Mm-hmm.
developed. And the only way to get to where we want to be is to do the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
We're just flipping the script and creating healthy habits. That's all we're
Mm-hmm.
doing. But you have to accept that fact and understand that you're going to be made uncomfortable at times.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay, because that's where growth is made.
I was going to say that's where the real growth formula exists, is in the change. You get the same
Mhm.
results if you do the same thing over and over again. So you got to
100%.
try something different, even if it's just minor incremental changes so that you can kind of digest and shift and all of that good stuff.
Mhm.
That's fine. You have to start somewhere.
Yep.
So, another statement you made in the book, you said if we can't control our health and well being, we can't take control of other aspects of our life. In your experience, how does taking control of your health and well-being correlate to the other aspects of your life?
Because health and well-being, taking control of that, to me, is the hardest thing we can do in our lives. I
Mm,
don't care whatever, anything anybody else throws at me. I said our health and well-being being the most important, point on the pyramid, if you will.
mm-hmm,
If we can take control of that, that just opens up more doors.
mm-hmm,
And for me, the second part of that is I'm a firm believer in the way we do one thing is the way we do everything. So if we take control of our health and well-being, if we do things the right way, it has this uncanny ability to infiltrate the rest of our life. All
mm,
of a sudden we start taking those same quality habits that we've developed taking care of ourselves
mm,
into other components of our life. But if we cut corners, I'll bet that if you took stock of the rest of your life, there's a better than average chance that you're cutting corners there too.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
It's real easy to, I mean, because we apply our mindset and our approach to life applies to everything we do. So if I'm going to work hard at something, it means it's important to me. So if there's something else in my life that's truly important to me, if I want to succeed in that, I'm going to apply that same approach, that same method to that. My workouts I have a coach of my own.
mm-hmm,
And I gladly and openly tell that to everyone
mm-hmm,
because most coaches are going to say, well, I can't tell them that because then it will discredit what I'm doing. No, any good coach, I don't care what line of work you're in, any good coach has coaches. I have a coach, I have a health and fitness coach. I have business coaches. Those business coaches have business coaches. My health coach has a health coach who has a health
mm-hmm,
coach. Because if you're not learning something new from other people, different perspectives, you're not growing, you're stagnating. So for me, it's understanding my workout program is very simple.
mm-hmm,
I tell my coach, like, well, what do you want me to do? I want you to treat me like your own client. Listen to what I'm telling you, what I'm looking for, create a program around what I'm telling you, and then hold my feet to the fire and make sure I do it.
mm-hmm,
Simple as that. And that's how I simplify all aspects of life. It's real simple. It's something I can, to use the same word you use, digest and be
mm-hmm,
able to just apply to life, all aspects of life. My schedule is very simple and straightforward. My health and fitness program, very simple and straightforward. My nutrition, very simple and straightforward. Again, the way I do one thing is
mm-hmm,
the way I approach that same way to other aspects of life. Because why would health and fitness be successful as a simple process? Why would I do that and then overcomplicate things over here?
right.
The way we do one thing is the way we do everything. So everyone listening, take stock of your life. If you're shortchanging yourself in one area, you're shortchanging yourself in other areas. I guarantee you.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Great words of wisdom. Oh, all right. So I want to kind of shift gears a little. You talk about achieving goals and needing to do that in a way that addresses the emotional, physical, and spiritual aspect. My jam is the spiritual space. So when you said that, I'm like, thank goodness, because a lot of times, not saying you are in this category, you're clearly not. Personal trainers go straight for body, image, working out in the
Mhm.
gym. And that spiritual element is so critical because a lot of our limiting beliefs and things that have happened are at a soul level. And so, share a little bit with us about that aha moment for you when it came to looking at the spirituality piece. And then, what did the process look like in your own journey?
Well, really, it's changed a lot over the past several years, even most recently. And by most recently, I mean maybe 6, 8 months ago, when
Okay.
my family and I started going back to church much more consistently than we were previously. And
Hmm.
and I credit my youngest son who goes to a Christian high school.
Hmm.
And so obviously he's learning more and more about not just religion, but about faith and
Hmm.
spirituality and what that looks like to him. Because I always considered myself a faith-based person in my own
Hmm.
way, just like you
Hmm.
have your own approach to that,
Yes.
and we all do, or at least we all should.
Hmm.
So him starting to go down that path and getting him to understand that the way he looks at it is going to be different than the way I look at it, and the way his mother looks at it, and the way his friends look at it, and his teachers look at it. So really making it much more of a personal understanding of here's what I believe in and here's why. And I think going back to church for us, it was a way, almost like a spiritual healing process. It was
Okay.
nice to go back and be in that environment again. And really, the church we go to is far different than what I grew up in. I grew up very, very conservative Catholic. The priests
Mhm.
were all 150 years old, or at least they seemed that way. And the process and the process that we learned and the process of how a
Mhm.
mass unfolds was the same then as it is now to this day,
Mhm.
all these many years later. And going to the church that we go to, which is connected to his school, they do it a different way. It's a much more laid back way. I could go in shorts and a t-shirt if I want to,
Mhm.
and the pastor is up there in maybe slacks and a polo shirt or something like that.
Mhm.
But the message is still the same. It's just how they present it that may be different. But it was good to go and start hearing a lot of those same lessons that I learned when I was growing up in a Catholic faith. I was going to Catholic school through elementary and middle school. It was great to revisit that, get back to the basics, if
Right.
if you will. So that I become even more and more well-rounded. Like I said earlier, I don't have it all figured out. You
Mhm.
know, I don't use the word expert,
Mhm.
in to equate it to knowledge or even experience for that matter. For me, it's the lessons I learned and experiences I had growing up, the mistakes I made over my childhood, over my earlier adult life, the mistakes I still make, to this day that I draw from. So whenever I have a converse, and that's why if anybody on your audience follows me on social media,
Mhm.
that's why I'm an open book. I don't have a problem sharing the good, bad, and the ugly because it all got me to this point. We
Mhm.
all have good, bad, ugly. So what difference does it make
Right.
if X number of people hear about it, or if I just keep it to myself? Who am I helping if I do that?
Mhm.
Somebody's
Mhm.
going to resonate. That's the main reason I wrote the book, to honor my family and to hopefully put it in the hands of people where something will resonate with them to the point where they take charge of their life, where they start to evoke change, affect change in their life. That was the goal for doing it. That's the goal of being in the business that I'm in, that you do as well, to help
Mhm.
people make change. That's what it comes
Yes.
down to. So I'm going to share every bit of it. So when I talk about health and well-being, you're right. You go into a gym setting, and this is where the foundation of my business is, where how it
Mhm.
began.
Mhm.
You work in a brick and mortar gym setting, and let's say we work together and we train an hour 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Monday just rolled around and we did our hour, and then Kristin, have a nice day, I'll see you on Wednesday. And then there's
Right.
no connection in between.
Mhm.
And I started to learn. I said, well, where are people falling short? They're doing the work. We're doing the work. I see them doing it.
Mhm.
So where are we falling short? And it's what they do when they walk out the door. Are they
Yeah.
leaving the gym and going to the local pizza place and having pizza and beer? Are they going
Mhm.
home and watching Netflix half the night and getting 4 hours of sleep? Or are they doing the
Right.
right things to help build on what they're doing in the gym? That was the basis, of the foundation of my business, still is. So it's getting people to understand that health and fitness isn't Monday, Wednesday, Friday for an hour each time. It's
Right.
24/7. So
It
so the
is.
program that they do, the plan that they follow has to look like that, has to
Yeah.
impact them in that way.
Yeah, one of the books that comes to mind when you're talking about that is Atomic Habits. And,
Hmm.
and it just jumped in my mind.
Sitting
And
on
I'm
my
thinking,
bookshelf right now.
yeah, it's such a great book because it really explores how it's those foundational building blocks. It's the domino effect. It's the one little change that can really impact what you're doing along the way. And so building strong habits, not just for the performance, right? Not just when you show up with your trainer in the gym and you're like, I'm getting it in. When what are you doing behind closed doors, right? What are you doing when people aren't looking?
Yep. I'm
That's
staring at that book right now, and I'm actually in the process of rereading it, as a matter of fact.
I love it. I love to go back and read books again as well because you read them and you interpret them differently depending on the phase of life you're in. So it may mean one thing to you the first time you read it, and then you go back, you see something different, or you say, "Ooh, now that I'm in this phase of life, it's more applicable here." So that's awesome. I have quite a few that I do that with as well. So let's talk about self-care. I'd like to know, what are your self-care go-tos when you're facing high stress or adversity in your life, what are your things that you do?
Well, first and foremost is getting in the gym and getting my workouts in. You know,
Awesome.
we talk about physical fitness. We call it physical fitness,
Mhm.
but it's less about, at least for me, and really it should be for most people, if not all,
Yeah.
it should be less about the physical and more about the mental, emotional, and spiritual,
Mm,
how it makes us feel. You know,
yeah.
do we feel proud of ourselves after we're done? Do we feel energized because, now the juices are flowing. Now I can
Mm,
attack the day. That's what it
mhm,
should be about. So for me, when I'm at my most stressed, I walk into my home gym, which is, 6 feet from where I'm sitting right now, and I close the doors and it's just me and the workout. That's
mhm,
it. I crank
mhm,
some music or I listen to a podcast, whatever it may be.
mhm,
But and the beauty of it is I think about nothing else than what I'm doing right that very moment for
mm.
that half hour, whatever it is. And then at the end, and I know the problems that are stressing me are just behind those doors. They're not
Right.
going away. But when I'm done, I've got a better perspective on things. I've got a clearer mind on things. So now I can go and tackle, all right, what is it that I'm really stressed about? And I need to focus less on why it's stressing me and more on finding a solution to
Mm.
that stressor. And I'm
Yeah.
able to do that. I'm able to start thinking more clearly that way. So that's one key component of it. There's something to be said about lifting heavy things and putting heavy things down in its
Yes.
most basic form. The other things is I like to, I mean, there is self-care. Some of us like to go, I just yesterday got a massage. I enjoy that.
Love
And
it.
so that's a good thing. Not something I pay for all the time because they can be expensive, but
Mm-hmm.
every once in a while I get that done. I've invested in a massage gun. I love massage gun. That's what I use in between. Those little stim machines. I love those things.
Oh,
Something
yes.
sore, just for
Uh-huh.
relax the muscles. I even went as far as investing in the leg compression sleeves. Thankfully, I
Love
found
it.
a knockoff brand, so I didn't pay a whole lot for them.
Right.
But but it's nice to get the circulation going. I've had leg injuries. I had a torn Achilles this time last year, so it's a great way to kind of get back to neutral, if you will, to
Mm-hmm.
relax everything. I like to read a book. And I don't mean have to go read Atomic Habits and all that,
Right.
just books to enjoy. I'm a big Harry Potter nerd, so I've got all the Harry Potter books sitting on my
Nice.
bookshelf right now that I've read
Nice.
more than once. So that's those are my go-tos where I can turn everything else off. That's the
Mm-hmm.
hardest part that we as a society face is that we have a real hard time turning off when we stop working, when we finish for
Mm-hmm.
the day. We're still
Mm-hmm.
thinking about it so much. So we
Yeah.
need things that help direct our minds elsewhere so we can recharge the battery and get back to neutral and be able to attack the next day with the same ferocity that we attacked that day.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. So you at one point in your book talk about the passion over paycheck, which I love that term. I feel like it could be a bumper sticker. I could see it on t-shirts. You need to think about doing that. Maybe
Yeah,
trademark
yeah,
that
absolutely.
statement. Yeah, I like that. But walk us through that because that would have required, I would suspect, some level of overcoming fear and really putting yourself out there. And I know that we're talking about overcoming fear today in our conversation. So, talk to us about how you navigated that process.
I know for me, and I take it, and I'll try to simplify it as much as possible, but I
Mhm,
take it all the way back to when I started college. This would have been back in 1989. I was going to go to college to become an attorney. Actually, my best friend, who is actually a partner in a law firm now,
mhm,
we were going to, graduate from college together, get our law degrees together, pass the bar together, start our own firm together, and we were half right. He did, I didn't. And what I discovered early on was that I wanted something that wasn't going to feel like work, and
mhm.
I wanted that to make the paycheck secondary. It'd be the bonus, not the
Okay.
be all and end all. And,
Mhm,
and what I discovered was after I took about 10 minutes into my first political science class, that, yeah, this isn't for me.
mhm,
So at that point, freshman in college, I'm thinking, all right, well, what am I going to do now? I'd put all my eggs in the law basket. Now I have to think of something else. So I figured, let me start doing some different things to kind of see if something piques my interest. And I started working for the college newspaper. I was a big sports fan growing up, still am. I love to write. I loved to write back then. I still do. I was the kid. My mom and my godmother, may she rest in peace, would vouch for this, that I was the
Mm-hmm.
kid at 8, 9 years old who would read the newspaper from cover to cover, especially the sports section. And I would read
Okay.
it out loud, which is what they remember most,
Uh-huh.
because it would resonate through the house.
Yeah.
So I decided, well, let me go work at the school newspaper, see if maybe that's something for me. And they had me start covering sports because they knew I was a sports fan and no one else wanted to do it. And I
Mm-hmm.
realized, well, wait a minute. I love to write. I love sports. Why don't I put them together and make a career out of it? It was like, I always tell people it wasn't an aha moment. It was a duh moment. It was kind of staring me
Right.
in the face.
Right.
I
Right.
just, it just didn't dawn on me at the
Yeah.
time. So I did that for 26 years
Mm-hmm.
and I loved it for 24 of them. That's what I tell people. The last two, I was getting burned out.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a lifestyle for somebody who wants to be, really big on health and wellness.
Right.
Because you work crazy hours, you work late into the evening, you're constantly on the road, you're eating out of your car, eating in the arena. And again, it's still my fault. Like I said earlier, I made those choices, but it doesn't exactly lend itself to a solid health and wellness type of lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the last 2 years, I was so burned out on it, I couldn't even watch a sporting event for fun because I
Mm.
was so burned out on it. And when it gets to that point, somebody as sports centric as I am,
Right.
something's wrong. So at
Right.
that point, I decided, well, I need to do something else, but I didn't know what. And again, another duh moment, thanks to my wife, who gave me the proverbial slap upside the head. I said, well,
Yep.
look, you've been in the midst of your own health and wellness journey. You've lost a ton of weight up to this point. And she goes, and what's been the transition in the gym? I said, well, in the beginning, I was the one asking other people around us, why are you doing this? Well, what type of workouts are you doing? What really picking their brains so I could learn more. Then it
Mm-hmm.
got to the point where the role was starting to reverse. People were asking me, why was I doing
Mm.
this? Why was I doing that? She's like, well, you love to help people. You were helping all those people for free.
Right.
Why not turn it into a career? Again, a duh moment, not an aha moment. It was
Mm-hmm.
right there staring me in the face. It just took my wife to kind of, uncover it for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I started to do. And I started, I also went through NASM to get my certification. And I was still working full time at that point in time. And that was about the time when we transitioned. We were living in Northwest Pennsylvania and we loved it there. 15 years, made a lot of great friends, raised our boys there. But we wanted to go live the beach life.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided we were just going to, again, one of those things that you wouldn't have done if you weren't confident enough in who you were to do it.
Right.
We just moved to Ocean City, Maryland, and went to live there. And
Mm-hmm.
I started working at a gym. That's where I started, cutting my teeth in the health and fitness trade. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where I started to gain more knowledge, more experience, more confidence, and became confident enough to build my business. But I'll tell people right now, I was scared every day of my life then, and I'm still scared to this day, and I'll still continue being scared moving forward. It's okay. I'm not saying that, oh, I just have so much confidence that I'm fearless. Absolutely not.
Right.
It scares me to this day that my business will fail because my family counts on my income. But
Yeah,
I use
absolutely.
that now as fuel. It's not
Mm-hmm.
it's not fear where I'm paralyzed. It's fear where I'm energized.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the biggest difference. It's using that fear to your advantage and not shying away from it.
Yeah. Ugh. Motivation. It's motivation and inspiration in
Yes,
its
that it is.
rawest form with a
That it
purpose.
is.
Yes. Well, we are coming to a close. I can't believe we're already at the end of our time together. I feel like I have so many more questions, so we're definitely going to have to bring you back. But if you could share
Absolutely.
one message with our listeners, what would it be?
Well, to be honest, it stems from my experience through my own health and fitness journey, which is ongoing, as well as the journey of writing my book, which took over a year to complete, is your story matters and you matter.
Mm,
We've all reached this point in our lives wherever we're at because of the good decisions we made and the bad decisions we made. And frankly, more so the bad decisions than the good ones. Those tend to
mm-hmm,
impact us more than the good ones ever will. So and the goal is to learn from those, but share that story, regardless of,
mm-hmm,
you don't have to be in the health and fitness industry to do this.
mm-hmm,
Share that story because there's somebody in your life that their story resonated with you. and it pushed you to take action. My goal is to do the same for others. That's why I share everything I share, whether it's embarrassing or not, because
Mm-hmm.
I want people to learn from my mistakes. So your story matters. Everybody's story is unique, to them specifically. No two people are alike. I don't care if you're actual twins. No two people are alike. You have
Right.
your own individuality to it, and
Mm-hmm.
play into that. Utilize that. And if
Mm-hmm.
there's something you want to do in life, go do it. It's going to scare you. That's okay. Use that fear to push you to do it, and just keep doing it like you actually intend to do it. Like the old saying, do it like, do something figure what you want to do and do it on purpose. Just do it. And whether you succeed or fail really doesn't matter. It's the
Yes.
fact that you took the chance on yourself, and you took, like I said, you took a chance on yourself, and you buy into who you are.
Mm. Love those words of wisdom. All right, Victor, share with our listeners how can they get in touch with you if they'd like to work with you? I know you said you also offer virtual online training. So for my listeners who are not local to North Carolina, don't fret. He's got you covered. He offers those options. Where can they find your book and where can they connect with you?
Absolutely. Well, starting with my website, fernandesfit.com, you can go on there and read more about me. I've got the blogs that I've just restarted doing recently, and you can find what different programs I offer. You can connect with me through there as well. So feel free to reach out. Social media, you've got Facebook. You can look up my name and be able to find me there. Instagram, it's Fernandes Fit LLC. YouTube, it's the Healthy Lives, Healthy Business YouTube page, along with the podcast by the same name. You can actually access all of those by going through my website as well. The book, Reclaiming My Authentic Self, A Journey from Fear to Freedom, you can find on Amazon. Just just type in my name and reclaiming, and it pops up. I've done it. And you're going to find my phone number out there as well. For me, I don't hide from people. It's the only number I've got. It's the same number I've had for over 20 years. No reason to hide it from people now. So, shoot me a message. Hey, just want to have a conversation. I'm not a salesy person. I know a lot of people say
Hmm.
that,
Hmm.
but my goal is to help people, whether you work with me or not. And if it's somebody that I know maybe isn't a good fit for me, or I'm not a good fit for them, I'm going to find somebody who is, or I'm at least going to find the information that's going to help them get started in the right direction, because that's what people did with me. And this is really just my way of paying it forward.
Love it. Well, for our listeners, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode of Surviving the Human Experience. And until next time, be well and stay blessed.